I know that you were in a position where you were basically in some ways forced to start your own venture. But for somebody who might be listening, and maybe what did you learn from that experience that would maybe somebody who's listening who maybe wants to leave, they don't want to climb the corporate ladder like you did. They want to, there may be something they're not passionate about. It's a great paycheck. It's a fine job, but maybe they're looking to start something. And what would be the process for them in terms of going out and doing that on their own?
Well, I think don't be afraid to make the sacrifice, right? That was something I was, somewhat afraid to do in leaving my job, but obviously not too afraid to, to decline a promotion, right? And to stay in a position that allowed me to have this side consulting firm that I was slowly growing until I could leave, right? So be willing to take that sacrifice, even if it means you have to move back in with your parents for a year, right? Or you have to downsize, or whatever it is.
Or you got to move to Guatemala.
Or you got to move to Guatemala, right? One of the things I did early on when I had one of my first startups that ended up not being successful, but was I had a car, and I sold a car, and I went and bought. It was a Nissan Sentra, like a 90-something Nissan Sentra for like $1,000 that my buddy's mom was selling. Right, so I had a car, sold that, and was driving that Nissan Sentra back and forth to work, and that's how I got my first funding for my startup, was selling that car. But I had to sacrifice, right? So be willing to sacrifice, because it's most likely going to be short term, right? It's most likely going to be short term, and in the long term, it'll be probably the best decision you ever made. Now, like I said, my first sacrifice did not work out, right? I drove that Nissan for a few years, and funding that startup didn't actually work out, but I learned a ton. And the next time I had an opportunity to sacrifice and start my own thing, I really had a lot of lessons that I had learned to put towards the success of my second venture.
Yeah, I think that idea of sacrifice is so key. I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday because I think it was episode 86. I had a gentleman named Sam Sohail on this podcast, and Sam came from Morocco, now owns 2 cigar lounges in Asheville, North Carolina, and Hendersonville, North Carolina, as well as a smoke shop, but came with $300 from Morocco. His family wasn't poor. He had I think his dad was, a doctor, and his mom was his dad was a banker, and his mother was a nurse or something. So, middle class, maybe even upper middle class family. But they just said, hey, we're just sending you with $300. Like, good luck. And he 3-4 years of his life, he said he worked every single day of the year except Thanksgiving, 7 days a week, 12-hour days. For about 4 or 5 months, he was homeless and had to sleep under a bridge. I mean, he didn't know the language, right? He knew a few languages, but not English right away. And now he does. But I interviewed him back in November, had met him originally back in August. And I remember just coming away from both of those conversations with him, just blown away by the sacrifice. And in some ways, I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, I think a few days after I got back from North Carolina is when I made the decision that I was going to start the business I'm in the process of starting now. I said, what? I don't know if I consciously thought this at the moment, but I think listening to all these entrepreneurs, people like yourself for 6 years, and then having Sam put this huge part of the conversation on sacrifice, and just being like, well, my sacrifice ain't anywhere near what that guy's sacrifice is. If I leave my job and I have to forget a few things, that's not even close. So what am I really willing to do this? Do I really believe in it enough? And yeah, at the end of the day, if I'm not successful, okay, I've got other things going for me too. It's not like it's the end of the world. So I think people have to kind of take those things into account and see, there's a lot of factors in life and things like that. But I think what you did is you buckled down and you did it. And I want to hear now the next step.
Without taking on investors or anything like that, or taking out a loan, how do you hire that first employee? How'd you do that? And I said, well, I worked 80 hours, right? I got to the point where I had enough work to fill 80 hours of my time. I get up every morning, I'd work for about 8 to 10 hours. I'd come home, I'd eat dinner with my family, I'd put my son to bed, and then I'd work another 5 hours, right? And go to bed sometime, 2 in the morning, get up, do it again. That was almost 2 years. It was almost 2 years of that. It felt like it was probably closer to a year, but it felt like 2 years. But once you're getting paid for 80 hours, you have the opportunity to bring someone on, right? And then my friend at this time, he asked me, "Oh, so you bring that other person on, that person works 40 and then you work 40." And I go, "No, that person works 40 and then you get to drop down to 70, right? But then you hire another person, maybe you get to 60 and then 50, and then it never goes lower than that." At least I don't think it does. But that was the biggest thing, is hiring that first person, because the first hire is one of the toughest, because when you are ready to make that first hire, second hire, it's so important that it's the right people, right? And it's great if you have those people lined up and you're not just putting out a employees wanted out there in the universe. Instead, you really know you're surrounded by really great team members that you want to bring on.